Let's talk about the proxy contract. And the reason this comes up is because we're seeing now with investors in general in crypto, because of how many scams there have been. And I think everybody in the business knows the amount of scams is increasing, not decreasing. They're getting a lot better at how they cheat people out of money. And it's caused people to be even skeptical of CERTIC, skeptical of audit firms, skeptical of KYC. And my stance has always been all you can really rely on is the trust of the devs and that they do what they told you that they're going to do and they deliver at the end of the day. But there are newer investors showing up, younger folks coming in, and the first thing they go to, because that's the messaging that's out there, is always check for audit and check what the audit says. With the proxy contract, though, as a technologist myself and as a certified crypto auditor, I understand the benefit behind it. The challenge is none of the audit tools are up to speed with what that's doing because it blinds them to some degree if it's an auto tool. If it's a manual audit, then they can at least know, okay, there's this over here and this is what it's doing and this is what it is. But
Yeah.
because it can change, they flag it as a risk. There's something that could be a risk to the investor because it could change because it's now not locked. My question for you is there some way to have your cake and eat it too, using
Mm.
something like EverOwn, for example, to where the contract, if they have some tool that solves it, where you can still have the proxy, but it's still at least aware and protected so that investors who are researching don't see it flagged because you can call out, no, EverOwn's got it covered. You can vet and verify that it's restricted, but we have easier access to make the changes to get the benefits. You know what I mean? Like, is there some way that you can have your cake and eat it too?
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm thinking about this a lot. For me, it's critical. Like the thing that gets me out of bed in the morning is building and innovating. And I have a real fundamental issue as a technologist, like you myself, of the notion that a contract you publish today is still going to be valid in 10 years time because you cannot touch it once it's live. And I think when you 10 years, somebody refers to crypto as like dog years. 10 years in crypto is like 50 years in the real world. So I have a real issue with that. It never quite sat right with me because this I remember when we put V1 live, or when as we were moving forward, there was constantly, oh, it'd be great if you could do this, great if you do that. Can't do it, can't do it, can't do it, can't do it. So I think there has to be a happy medium, and I'm certain this is the way that we're going. The only thing I would say though is that I always get the sense that the true ins and outs of how investors are protected is a little bit grey, because you can have an immutable contract that's been audited, but like you said, if the devs or the people behind the project are fundamentally bad actors, they can still go and take the liquidity. So I think what you said is right. You fundamentally have to understand who's behind this project, just like if it was a business, to be satisfied that you can trust them. And our, I suppose, solution to that is, for a start, you can see me. I'm a real person. I'm doxed. The team is doxed. You can visit my LinkedIn. I've got nothing to hide. Very proud of what we're now doing. So there's that. We have a GitHub for our contracts. So I believe me, if you're anyone in our community will get a very much detailed update every time we update the contract, because I'm like, you know, my other half won't listen to it, unfortunately. So like I'll tell anyone that will, oh, we've done this. Oh, we're doing this. Oh, this is really cool. And we'll actually say, these are the things we've updated on the contract, and it'll go into our GitHub repository so you can see those steps. Really interestingly, though, we had a conversation the other day in the team where we had this sort of hypothetical conversation around, well, what's the next stage? Because an immutable contract is like a really redundant piece of code, but a proxy contract has its kind of concerns within the market. So what's the solution? And I look at the tool you mentioned there on Everend, because I really fundamentally believe it's the right direction. Like some of the stuff we've done in 5 weeks to iterate our contract has been amazing. Like we've done some stuff that people have been screaming out for since May last year, just like that. So I think the transparency, the communication, using repositories, telling people the updates you're making, and just being a team that people can trust by your actions, by doxing, by communication is currently what we're doing. But we have discussed, what more can we do, because we are on this pathway with the proxy
I
contracts.
like I like that you got GitHub. That's good. The challenge, not challenge, but the difficulty, I'll say, even for certain investors, some don't even know GitHub exists. And
Yeah.
GitHub tends to be challenging to navigate for certain people just because it's built that you assume that you're in it and you know code. And so the where I try to do as the way I approach my audits is more of the market ready, low
Mm.
level investor, the layman investor, the outside the bubble investor that's coming in that doesn't know these things. And what can we do to change the game with how we present the project? Ever own is the one solution I've seen to the big problem, which is I can take a contract and I can quote restrict it, but I don't have to renounce. And then the community, when we have a need to change something or a desire to improve it, we go to the community and say, we want to make these changes. And then the
Mm.
community, using their stake, votes and says, yep, we think that's a great idea. And when it votes pass, it unlocks the contract, and you say, I just need it for 2 weeks, and then it relocks itself again, but you can always get access to the code. But the beauty of it is that you can tell that story to the investors that you can go to Everown yourself, independent Mr. Investor, and see the code is protected and we can't make changes unless if you say that it's okay and you agree with the change. Because it's also, do they agree with the change? Because what we're dealing with now with Libero Financial as an example. They're making
Yeah.
changes because it's not renounced, but a lot of the investors don't agree with the changes being made because of the
Mm.
way their structure works. Well, to me, as the market ready investor, I thought it was cool when I saw Everown said, I like the fact that renounce what it's supposed to do, but it's too restrictive. You get into this immutable situation. They need the flexibility to serve their investors, but how can you get the best of both worlds, which is we'll give
Yeah.
the temporary lock and we'll let the community control that. Now it's a cell that the CEO can go to the community and say, you guys now are, this is truly a community project. I'm assuming that you're aware of the Terra and Luna and all that fiasco, having heard about it. They claim to be a community type thing with a DAO, but then the DAO was built that the low level investor had no voice. It was always about the whales, and that harmed sentiment to the point that both tokens are struggling. Well, I'm sure that's not what they wanted. Where okay, well, what was the benefit of the DAO if it's not for all the community as opposed to the higher level? So the my feedback was today, I know if I'm coming in, a new investor comes in and they say, Leister, I'm new. I got a little bit of money. I have this. I have a third world country and I got $20 to my name. And I'd like
Mm.
some life-changing money, but I don't want to lose what I got because I still got to feed my family. I have to give them something where they got 100% confidence it's not going to go anywhere. It's not going to take them away. And I'm looking for those projects that say, yeah, we can tweak and we can improve and get better. Holding the improvements I saw were significant compared to what it was before in the presence and the business minded and the people and the messaging. Then it was, okay, this proxy, I got to solve that because while I understand it, that's because I'm a nerd. My person over here, they're going to be like, but it says that they can change everything. So that's
Yeah.
issue number one. The issue number two, and I want to ask about this one, the liquidity appears to be unlocked. If that's by design, the other tool is called Everlock, same ecosystem. And Everlock, what it does is the same thing, but for the liquidity. So it locks the liquidity temporarily. You say we need X thousands of dollars from the liquidity to run this campaign. Community votes, it unlocks it for a period of time, gives you access to it, and then relocks it again. So now you've covered every base, which is you can do what you need to do. The community has the authority of what you do and when and why, but it also is protected and they help protect against any sort of like sniper stuff and breaches. They have other things to it. So I was going to recommend at least look at those two, ever own, ever lock, and see if they make sense for what whole token's doing. Because once those two are no longer flagged at that point, then it's like, okay, these guys are ready to hit the ground running once we get out of the bear period.
Yeah. I definitely will look into those. I have come across them, but I haven't gone into them in deeply. But I have because around about the same time that I first invested into HODL, I heard about Everrise as well and invested into a little bit into that. Now I'm a bit boring and I literally only have HODL, but I did hear about them because I thought it was quite an innovative project, and we'll check it out. Um, there is one thing though that's interesting that I would put to you as almost like a counter to that, because I agree with it in the main, but when it comes to making decisions as a company, so for example, my mind is literally wired with the optics of HODL, like because I get out of bed, I work on it until I crash, I dream about it, I get up and repeat. So I'm in a position to be able to see all of the optics and work with the team, and we do polls within the team. So for example, we have a max sell um, cap of an amount of tokens per wallet per 24-hour period, and we had a poll internally about should we increase that cap, and head towards this level, and we voted on it. There are other polls where we've polled the community. So we polled the community um, regarding changing the claim. So we were on 1 day claim, but because the reward pool's a bit lower, we've extended it to 7 day claim, so that basically the system auto stacks your reward and you pay one gas fee on 7 days worth of reward rather than on 1 day. And that was to help the smaller investor. So we did poll the community on that. And I think we had something like 93% say yes. So I do agree in the concept of what you're saying, but I would worry slightly that you are driving a business by polling people who are engaged to very different levels and only have access to an amount of the overriding optics. I think it would be a very unusual way to operate for, say, a company outside of crypto. And we're trying to run this a bit like a company. So that's my only thing. And it's kind of like we're thinking the same way. I think, you know, I could convince anybody through what we've shown over the last weeks that the power of our proxy contract's pretty amazing, because it's like, bang, we've done X, Y, Z, and we're going to keep that going, and all these cool innovations like we did stacking rewards. But I do agree that there is this kind of misconception around it, or concern around it. And I do agree with some of what you said, but those were things that when I did have those thoughts myself as well, I had slight concerns around. Is that it's almost uh, that could become slightly problematic, polling on everything, in my opinion. But I do get it. Needs a bit more
I
thought,
agree
but I
with
think we're
you.
on the same path.
100% agree in not running a business based on the
Mm,
challenge. I think in cryptocurrency, it is particular in one small case that's starting to matter more to people,
mm,
which is that in cryptocurrency, people don't really have protections. Outside of crypto bubble, you have certain layers of protections, whether it's bank account protections or just general money laundering protections or fraud protections. You have multiple layers, at least in the US, you do. I know the UK, you do. And certain, you have layers of things that kind of help keep you safe. All the way, like Bernie Madoff levels, you get ripped off, and eventually people did get some money back because there's levels of layers of protection that you can fall back on. In
mm,
crypto, it's kind of, unfortunately, I don't know if you watched the show, but we did an interview with Joshua Segala. Joshua Segala was the person in 2011 that said, you need to buy this Bitcoin. It's going to be something. And nobody listened to him. And
mm,
he had said that ultimately we did crypto wrong, which is we turned it essentially into a casino. It's basically a gamble for everybody getting in. You're gambling that it's going to succeed. You're gambling you won't get ripped off. You're gambling in trust. You're gambling in change. Like, let's say Mr. Roberts gets hit by a train, a new leader comes in, and they don't have the ethics that you do. And then all of a sudden, the money's taken and run. That happened to Floki. Floki's a V3. V1, they rug pulled, they do a V2, and
mm.
then it rug pulls again, and then they have to do a DAO because they have to lock it because they can't rely on trust like that in to
No.
keep investors, and it's never recovered. So my feedback on those two is only to get the best of both worlds, at least for now, until the crypto world gets to where we are self-regulating better than we do. I think in the bear period, it's like key opportunity to rethink how do we keep all investors kind of satisfied of we still
Yeah.
need the control that we got, but we also understand that there's this nervousness around scams, rug pulls, and honeypots, and how do we use something, even if it's only for now, until we get a little bit more framework around regulatory and self-regulation and rigor than we do, not just for you, by the way, but again, if Mr. Roberts gets hit by a train, your successor may not have the same ethics you do. That's also in people's mind of, it sounds good now, but what happens if somebody else unethical comes in and they don't share the vision, or they're just greedy, or there's a dev. Let's say a dev just gets a rough spot and they get desperate, and this happened to Green Chart. Green Chart was perfectly fine in the ethics side,
Mm.
but the dev called one of the women in the community that they were attracted to, gave that person a private key who drained the project. There's no way to anticipate that that could happen. But the point is, because that was allowed to happen, it
Yeah.
created the risk. And that's making people nervous too. That's the only reason I bring those two up as at least something to look at and think about, because mine is only to say, what all can we do that's not too much, but not, it's a little,
Yeah.
this is what we can, the best we can do to get 80%, let's say, of confidence in a project and where we're going. And then the
Mm.
rest is going to have to wait until we get to a better regulatory structure, if that makes any sense.
Totally agree. Yeah. I'm going to look at those two tools in more detail. I do think it sounds good. I do agree. It is a nightmare, like there is the space is so problematic, and I have a real issue with it because yeah, I do. I've always done the right thing because if we went on to be really successful and I've had to cheat to achieve that, it wouldn't be much of a victory for me. So it's not what I'm about, and there are things I've been doing recently. So, for example, as part of my moving into the CEO role with JG, who's moving from the CEO role into the CMO role, we've had like a proper agreements drafted between us that even includes things like, because I was discussing this with one of the team, that the IP that we create in this project belongs to this project. So if I was to leave the project, I can't take the IP with me. So we're doing bits like that. We've started to take people on, and everybody that we hire that is on the books, that is paid to work for the company on a full-time or a part-time basis, they have a contract which includes some of those clauses. We're setting up bookkeeping. So one of the first things that we did when I moved into the position is we put onto the website our project funds, so you can see how much is in our project funds folder. And then the idea is that we're going to start doing bookkeeping on that as well, so you'll actually see what we've got, what we've spent, and some of the information about where that's gone. Obviously, we're not going to give you the names of people that we've paid and stuff. That would be a bit unfair on them. But again, it's that whole balance thing. But these are the kind of things that I've done in businesses when we've had angel investors, etc. So I'm trying to bring it in into crypto because it is a massive problem. These things you mentioned, and it's dragging us down, and it's dragging the whole space down. And I think this bear market we're in is slightly driven by some of the greed off the back of the last bull run and the last several bull runs, where people are developers and project owners, you know, are making too much money too easily. They don't care. It's like you say, it feels more like gambling. And we want this to be a technology company, so the bookkeeping, contracts between HODL and anyone it employs, contracts internally between me and people on the C-suite, trying to layer more stuff like that in. But yeah, we need more. So I know that after this, I'll be thinking about all these stuff and having a look at Everrise, because yeah, I think you're right. And when I laid out my vision as CEO when I stepped in, and the first thing on the list was to improve community trust, and then that cascades down into some of these areas, and we've ticked some of them off. But yeah, we're going to tick more off, because I think you're absolutely right.